I've come into the greenhouse this morning, which is pretty crazy this time of the year because it is midsummer for us and things like the cucumbers are going crazy. We're picking quite a lot of those now. But this morning what I'm here to do is to pick some tomatoes, and I thought it would be interesting to do a little bit of a comparison between these greenhouse tomatoes and the tomatoes that I'm also growing outside and see the difference in growth, and also comparing that some of these plants were actually, the seeds were planted at the same time, and how much more advanced these greenhouse ones are, and really show you why here in Tasmania it is worthwhile having a greenhouse. Now this first variety that I am picking is Legend, and it's an indeterminate tomato. I've grown it via the espalier method, so that I've got branches coming out each corner here, so it's going 4 ways as well as up the middle. And growing them like this really opens the tomato plant up to allow more airflow through and helps reduce disease, which is really important in a greenhouse. Now, we've been picking these for around about 2 weeks now. It's probably approaching their peak harvest today. With being nice and open with this espalier method, it's easy to see the tomatoes, easy to find them. Despite the fact that this is pretty overgrown, I really need to come and do some weeding. I've got lettuce going to seed in here, and weeds as well as other plants. So yeah, it's a bit thick. Okay, so that's the harvest for the Legend today. Now, these are nice looking tomatoes. The Legend is producing really well. I do find it a little bit firm for my liking, but it does hold very well. So if you're looking for a tomato that will keep once it's picked, here's a firmer tomato. It's really good. Now this next tomato is the Cindle, and it's even weedier than the other. It's a bit harder to find the tomatoes because they're down amongst the weeds, and I really need to come in and weed this. This time of the year it's often hot here in the greenhouse, so you're a bit more reluctant to come in and work. Now, Cindle is a determinate plant, so they're not as large. So a good tomato to grow if you have limited space. And this is a softer tomato, so really quite tasty too. So I do like the Cindle, it's a really good tomato. So this is the harvest for this morning. Most of these came from the Legend, but these top ones from the Cindle. This is a really nice example of tomato from the Cindle. Nice and soft, it'll be a really juicy tomato. As an eating tomato, I prefer the Cindle. For production, the Legend is obviously the winner, but the first production came from the Cindle, so it actually won the race to produce the first tomatoes, which was at least 2 weeks ago now, and this is early January. So it was late December that we started harvesting here. I think the Legend is probably going to produce a lot more tomatoes than the Cindle will overall. The Cindle being a smaller plant, you need to probably grow more of them to actually get the production. But a nice early tomato and a nice eating tomato. So let's pop outside and see what's happening out there. Well, as you can see, the outdoor tomatoes are growing really well. The plants are doing just fine. I've got different varieties in here, which you'll know if you saw the earlier video where I planted them. These first two here are the Legend and the Cindle. and the seeds were actually planted at the same time as the ones that are in the greenhouse. Now, the legend down here has the first fruit ripening of any of these outdoor ones. As I said, the greenhouse ones have been producing for 2 weeks and are now giving good amounts. These are still a few days away from being ready to pick, but there's the promise of a lot of fruit coming on these plants. They're getting a little bit too high now for my trellis, and so what I will do, I won't stay and do it now because it's actually trying to rain on me, but is to just clip these tops off, and I need to tie them back a little bit, and doing that will make them branch more and put more energy back into the tomatoes that have been set already. Often I find these ones that go higher don't produce great tomatoes anyway because the plant is really running out of energy by the time they start to ripen, which is still quite a few weeks away, and the summer will be over by that time. But I'm really happy with the growth here this year. However, to me this really illustrates the advantage of starting some in the greenhouse. Yes, it's good to get a bulk crop outdoors for making things like sauce and bottling and that type of thing because you've got the space. But for that early eating, for salads and that type of thing, the greenhouse is the way to go here in Tasmania. And of course that applies to any cooler climate. There's some places, of course, where the greenhouse is the only way you're going to grow your tomatoes. Up this end, you'll see the Tommy Toe, and you can see they really go crazy, being an indeterminate small tomato. They have a lot of fruit coming, but the plants are getting just too big. So as I showed you earlier, I'll come back and I'll snip the tops of these so that I can actually handle it and control it. Now this one in here is the purple Cherokee, and they're starting to develop some size, but nothing ripening yet. Now the seeds were planted a few weeks after the legend, so from that perspective the legend had a head start, even though the plants were the same size when they came outdoors. But this is the first time I've grown these, so I'm interested to see what they're going to be like. But they're still probably at least a month away from producing fruit. The Romas that I'm growing here this year are all determinate Romas. They come from seed that I saved myself, and you can see the fruit is coming, but it is still a long way away from production. Being a determinate, these are much easier to deal with. They don't really take much effort at all. Just tying them up occasionally. I come by probably at least once a week to 2 weeks at the most. I need to come by and tie them back onto the frame. Otherwise I can pretty much ignore them until they're ready to pick. Oh, of course I do have to water. For water, what I'm doing is watering them using this weeper hose that I put in when I planted them, and that just goes around the roots. I put a filter on it to stop it blocking up, and I generally run that, say, overnight for a whole night on each row, and alternate and do that about once a week. This is now our dry time, apart from today where it's trying to rain on me as I make this video, and it's very good to see some rain. We hope we actually get a little bit more of it, because from now until March we really don't expect a lot. Anyway, that's just a little comparison between tomatoes in the greenhouse and outdoors at this time of the year, when we're seeing the big difference between the two.